Sophia, I just want to know them. I want to be a part of their lives. I won't leave until you tell me the truth. Sophia shook her head, her hands trembling. I'm not letting you hurt them, Ethan. Her words hit him like a slap in the face. He wasn't sure what hurt more, her rejection or the idea that he might. Ethan Carter had everything. Money, power, a life most people could only dream of. He stepped out of his sleek black car, adjusting the cuffs of his expensive suit. The city was alive, but he barely noticed. He wasn't here to enjoy the streets, just to grab coffee. As he walked toward the cafe, his phone buzzed. Another business deal, another $1 million contract. Nothing new. Make sure the Tokyo deal is locked in, he said, his voice calm and cold. Yes, Mr. Carter, his assistant replied. He ended the call and slipped his phone into his pocket. Business was predictable. People were predictable. His life was perfect, or so he thought, because in the very next moment, his world stopped. He heard a voice, a soft, familiar voice. His feet froze. His heart pounded. Slowly, he turned his head, scanning the busy sidewalk. People walked past, lost in their own lives. And then, he saw her, Sophia. His breath caught in his throat. It had been 10 years since he last saw her, but she wasn't the woman he remembered. Gone was the confident, laughing girl he once loved. She sat on the cold pavement, her arms wrapped around two small children. Her face was pale. Her once beautiful brown hair hung in messy strands. Her clothes were old and worn. A small tin cup sat beside her, barely holding a few coins. Ethan's stomach twisted. People passed by without a second glance. No one cared. She was just another beggar to them. But to him, she was Sophia, the woman who disappeared from his life without a word. And those children, who were they? His gaze landed on the little boy. Something about him felt strange. Then Ethan's chest tightened. The boy's eyes, they were green, the exact shade of green as his own. For a moment, the world blurred. The noise of the city faded. It was just him, Sophia, and the two children clinging to her. He took a slow, shaky breath and stepped forward. Sophia? Her head snapped up. For a second, her face was blank. Then her eyes widened in shock. She gripped the children tighter, her body tensing like a cornered animal. Ethan stared at her, his mind racing. What happened to her? Why was she here? And why? Why did that boy have his eyes? Sophia pulled the children close and looked away. She was pretending she didn't know him. But he knew. She knew exactly who he was, and she was afraid. Ethan took another step closer. Sophia, what are you doing here? She didn't answer. The little girl clung to her mother's arm, hiding her face. The boy, however, stared directly at Ethan. It sent a shiver down his spine. Ethan's voice hardened. Are you going to ignore me? Sophia finally spoke. Her voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. Go away, Ethan. A strange mix of emotions hit him all at once. Anger, confusion, pain. She was the one who left him. She disappeared without a word. And now she was sitting here, begging? Ethan's jaw tightened. What happened to you? His tone was sharper than he intended. Sophia's fingers clenched into fists. Just leave, please. Ethan wasn't used to being ignored. He was used to people answering him. But Sophia, she was shutting him out completely. He wasn't going to let that happen. He crouched down, lowering his voice. Who are they? Sophia stiffened. His heart pounded. Was he right? Were they his? The little girl peeked up at him with wide brown eyes. She looked nothing like him. But the boy, he was a mirror image. Ethan's hands curled into fists. He felt like the ground was slipping beneath him. Sophia's lips pressed into a tight line. They're my children. Ethan's breath came fast. His mind screamed for answers. Who's their father? Sophia's face hardened. That doesn't matter. Ethan's fist clenched. It matters to me. A long, tense silence hung between them. Then Sophia did something he never expected. She reached out and grabbed the tin cup, shoving it toward him. If you feel guilty, just throw in some money and walk away, she said bitterly. Ethan stared at her. She thought this was about pity. She thought he'd toss some cash and leave. He wasn't leaving. Not until he knew the truth. Not until he knew why she vanished. And not until he knew if that little boy was his son. Ethan's fingers curled into fists. His pulse hammered in his ears. He wasn't imagining it. The boy looked exactly like him. The same sharp nose, the same green eyes. It wasn't a coincidence. Sophia clutched the tin cup in her shaking hands. She held it up, her fingers trembling. "Take out your wallet, Ethan," she said, her voice flat. "That's all rich men like you do, right?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "I'm not here to throw money at you, Sophia." "Then why are you here?" she snapped, her eyes flashing. "Why are you even talking to me?" Ethan stepped closer, his voice firm but controlled. "Because I want answers." Sophia shook her head and looked away. The little girl, still hiding behind her mother's arm, let out a soft whimper. The boy, his mirror image, stared at him with eyes far too knowing for a child. Ethan knelt down, his voice softer now. "Sophia, tell me the truth. Who was their father?" Sophia didn't look at him. A bitter laugh escaped her lips. "You think you can just walk in after 10 years and demand answers?" Ethan's fingers twitched. He was losing control. He had never been a man to let emotions guide him. But right now he was desperate. "Are they mine?" His voice was low, but there was no mistaking the force behind it. Sophia's body went rigid. Her lips parted slightly, but she didn't speak. Her silence was enough. Ethan's stomach twisted. A sharp pain, one he had never felt before, clawed at his chest. 10 years. Had he unknowingly left behind his own children? The street bustled with people, but Ethan felt like the world had shrunk to just him and Sophia. A cold wind blew past, rattling a newspaper across the pavement. Sophia's fingers tightened around the little girl's shoulders. She kept her gaze locked on the ground. Ethan exhaled, trying to steady himself. "Why didn't you tell me?" Sophia flinched, but she didn't answer. "Why, Sophia?" His voice cracked slightly, betraying the emotions he was trying to control. Finally, she looked up. Her eyes weren't just tired. They were filled with something else. Hurt, anger, fear. "You really want to know?" she whispered. Ethan's heart pounded. "Yes." Sophia let out a breath, then shook her head. "It doesn't matter anymore." Ethan's hands clenched into fists. "It matters to me." She let out a sharp, bitter laugh. "Oh, it matters now? Now that you're standing here in your $1,000 suit? Now that you see them?" Her words cut deep, but Ethan wasn't going to back down. "Sophia, I deserve to know," he said, his voice quieter now. She laughed again, but this time there was no humor in it. "You don't deserve anything, Ethan," she muttered. The little boy shifted, watching the conversation with wide eyes. Sophia noticed. She turned, cupping his face gently. "It's okay, sweetheart," she whispered. "Don't be scared." Ethan felt something tighten in his chest. The way she spoke to the boy, the way she held him. She had raised him alone, and he hadn't even known. Silence stretched between them. The city noises seemed distant now. Ethan forced himself to speak. "You should have told me." Sophia's eyes flashed. "And what would you have done, Ethan?" She didn't let him finish. "You were already gone," she said, her voice raw. "You were too busy building your empire, too busy becoming the great Ethan Carter." Ethan flinched. Her words hit harder than they should have, because deep down, he knew she was right. He had been chasing success, chasing power, but he had never once looked back, never once wondered why Sophia disappeared. And now, standing in front of her, he realized she had been carrying a secret he never even knew existed. The wind picked up again, rustling Sophia's hair. Ethan ran a hand through his own hair, exhaling. "I didn't know." Sophia let out a dry laugh. "Of course you didn't." The bitterness in her voice stung. She turned away, gripping the tin cup tighter. "Just leave, Ethan." Ethan stayed still. His feet refused to move. The little girl peeked up at him, her big brown eyes filled with curiosity. The boy, however, kept staring. Ethan swallowed hard. "I won't leave." Sophia sighed, exhausted. "I have nothing to say to you." "Then let me talk to them." Sophia's body stiffened. "No." Ethan's jaw clenched. "No," she repeated, this time louder. People around them started to glance their way. Ethan lowered his voice. I just want to know them, Sophia. A flicker of emotion crossed her face. Pain, regret, something else he couldn't quite read. Then just as quickly, it was gone. I don't need your help, Ethan, she whispered. His heart pounded. But they do. Sophia's face twisted, as if his words had physically hurt her. She pressed her lips together, turned to the children and whispered, Come on, let's go. She took the little girl's hand and reached for the boy, but he didn't move. He was still staring at Ethan. Ethan held his breath. For a moment it felt like time had stopped. Then in a quiet voice the boy spoke. Are you my dad? Ethan's heart stopped. Sophia's face drained of color. The little girl's eyes widened, and Ethan, for the first time in his life, had no words. Ethan stood frozen, his mind reeling. The little boy's words echoed in his ears. Are you my dad? His heart was beating fast, his breath shallow. Sophia looked at him, her face pale, her eyes full of regret. She opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. The silence between them was heavy, suffocating. Ethan blinked, trying to shake the fog in his head. He looked down at the boy, at his son, and for the first time in his life, he felt completely lost. He started, but his voice faltered. How do you answer a question like that? Sophia quickly grabbed the boy's hand, pulling him away. Don't listen to him, Aaron, she said, her voice breaking. He's not your father. Ethan wanted to argue, to tell her that he had a right to know. He wanted to ask her why she had kept this from him for so long, but all he could do was stand there, paralyzed by the shock. Aaron's wide green eyes never left him. They were full of questions, full of hope, and that was what tore Ethan apart. He had abandoned him, his own son. Sophia turned quickly, trying to hide the pain in her eyes, but it was too late. Ethan saw it. She wasn't just angry. She was scared. Scared of him, scared of what he might do now that he knew. Where are you going? Ethan finally managed to ask, his voice barely a whisper. Sophia didn't answer right away. She glanced down at her children before speaking in a low, tight voice. We're leaving. There's nothing for you here. But Ethan wasn't going to let her walk away again. He stepped forward. Sophia, wait. I need answers. I need to understand. She hesitated, her eyes darting to the side as if searching for a way out. Ethan's heart raced. I don't care about the past. Hurt his own children by simply wanting to be a father. But he wasn't giving up. I'll take responsibility for them, he said firmly. If they're mine, I'll take care of them. I swear. Sophia stared at him for a long moment, her eyes searching his face. Then with a sigh, she glanced at the children. She was about to say something when the little boy spoke again. I remember you, Aaron said, his voice soft but clear. When I was little, I remember a man like you. Ethan's breath caught in his chest. The boy remembered him. Sophia turned sharply, her face full of fear. Aaron, stop, she whispered urgently. Please don't say anything more. But it was too late. Aaron had already spoken the words that would change everything. Ethan kneeled down in front of the boy. You remember me? Aaron nodded slowly, but Sophia was already pulling him away, her hand tight around his arm. I don't know what you're trying to do, Ethan, but I won't let you get any closer. Her words were filled with a mix of anger and fear, and Ethan felt the weight of them settle on his shoulders. He stood there for a moment, feeling the sting of rejection again, but then something clicked in his mind. Aaron had said something about remembering him. Could it be possible? Could it be that Sophia hadn't left just because she wanted to? Could it be that there was more to this than he knew? Wait, Ethan called, taking a step forward. Sophia turned, her face tense. Please, he said, his voice more urgent now. Tell me why you left. Tell me what happened. Sophia's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't speak. Instead, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, crumpled envelope. She walked up to Ethan and shoved it into his hand. Take it, she said quietly. You'll find out everything you need to know. Ethan stared at the envelope in his hand, confused and overwhelmed. Before he could ask any more questions, Sophia turned and began to walk away, pulling the children with her. Wait, Sophia! Ethan called again, but she didn't stop. Ethan's fingers trembled as he looked down at the envelope. The weight of it felt heavy, but he knew he had no choice but to open it. Inside, there was a letter. His heart raced as he unfolded it. The letter read, "Ethan, if you are reading this, it means that the time has come. I couldn't keep running from the truth. Aaron and Lily are your children. I know you don't want to believe it, but it's the truth. You abandoned us, and I had to protect them. But now they deserve to know who their father is. It's time for you to face what you've done. Please don't hurt them. Please don't make the same mistake again." Ethan's hands shook as he finished reading. His mind spun. Aaron and Lily, his children. Ethan's fingers were trembling as he held the letter. The words on the paper blurred in front of him. He felt a tight knot in his stomach, his mind racing with questions. Aaron and Lily, his children. How had he not known? Why had Sophia kept this secret from him for so long? As he stood there on the busy street, the noise around him faded. People passed by, but Ethan didn't notice them. He was lost in his thoughts, his mind spinning with all the unanswered questions. The letter was still clenched in his hand, but he couldn't make sense of it. It was like a puzzle, and he had no idea where the pieces fit. Why hadn't Sophia told him the truth earlier? Why had she kept the children hidden from him? And most importantly, what had really happened all those years ago? Ethan stared at the envelope, the weight of it pressing down on him. He had to know the truth. He had to find out what happened, no matter how painful it might be. He folded the letter carefully, slipping it back into the envelope. He took a deep breath and walked toward his car, his steps heavy with the burden of the truth that was now starting to surface. The drive back to his penthouse was a blur. His mind was filled with images of Sophia and the kids. He couldn't shake the memory of the little boy's eyes. Aaron's eyes. They were green, just like his. Ethan's heart ached at the thought. He had been so focused on building his empire that he never once looked back. He had never thought about the life he had left behind. He had never even considered that Sophia might have been carrying his children. When he arrived at his penthouse, Ethan immediately went to his desk. He pulled open the drawer, grabbing his laptop. He needed to dig deeper. He needed answers. The letter had only raised more questions, and he couldn't rest until he had some kind of clarity. He opened his laptop, typing Sophia's name into the search bar. At first, there was nothing. Then he stumbled upon an old news article from 10 years ago. The headline read, "Local woman vanishes without a trace after sudden breakup." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He clicked on the link and scanned the article quickly. The details were vague, but it was clear that Sophia had left the city suddenly, just after their breakup. There were mentions of rumors. People said that she had been in a secret relationship before she disappeared. They also mentioned how she was spotted with a baby just a few months after leaving. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to come together, but Ethan still didn't know why she had kept all of this from him. He sat back in his chair, running his hands through his hair. The truth was finally sinking in. Sophia had left because she had his child. But why? Why had she kept Aaron and Lily hidden from him all these years? And who had convinced her to do it? Ethan grabbed the phone off his desk. He had to talk to Sophia again. He couldn't keep sitting here, letting the truth slip through his fingers. He dialed her number. It rang for what felt like an eternity before she picked up. "Ethan!" Sophia's voice was cold, guarded. "I need to talk to you," Ethan said, his voice tight with urgency. "About everything. Please." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. He could hear Sophia breathing, but she didn't speak. "I know about Aaron and Lily," Ethan said, his voice softening. "I know they're mine." Silence. Sophia's voice was barely a whisper. "How?" "I found the letter you left me." For a moment, there was only the sound of her breathing. Then finally she spoke. "Ethan, I didn't want you to find out this way. I didn't want you to know anything at all." Ethan felt his chest tighten. "But you had to tell me. You had to tell me the truth." Sophia sighed. "I couldn't. I was afraid. Afraid that if you knew, you would turn your back on them." "What happened, Sophia?" Ethan's voice cracked. "Why did you leave? Why didn't you tell me?" "I couldn't stay, Ethan. Not after everything. You were gone. You didn't care about me, about us." Her words hit him hard. He had never realized how much she had been hurting, how much pain she had carried. Sophia continued, her voice breaking. I tried to tell you before, but it was too late. You had already moved on with your life. I was just, I was just someone you'd forgotten. Ethan's throat tightened. I never wanted to forget you. I never wanted any of this to happen. But now, Sophia interrupted him, her voice steady but full of sorrow. I'm sorry, Ethan. I never meant for things to turn out this way. But I had to protect them. I had to protect our children. Ethan's heart twisted. I know, I never knew. I never realized. The silence between them was heavy. Finally, Sophia spoke again. It's too late for us now, Ethan. But you can still make things right for them, for Aaron and Lily. Ethan's eyes filled with determination. I will. I swear I will. Sophia didn't respond. She simply hung up the phone, leaving Ethan standing there, feeling the weight of the decision he had just made. Ethan's hands were shaking as he stared at his phone screen, the call with Sophia still lingering in his ears. She had hung up without saying anything else, leaving him. The atmosphere was thick with tension, as if Sophia had been preparing for this moment for a long time. You came, she said, her voice soft but guarded. I had to, Ethan replied. I'm not leaving until we talk. Sophia sighed, her shoulders slumping. I don't want to do this, Ethan. He looked at her, his heart aching. I know, but we have to. I need to understand. Why didn't you tell me? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she motioned toward the living room. Let's sit down. They both sat on the couch, the silence between them thick and uncomfortable. Ethan was the first to speak. I've been a fool, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I've spent the last 10 years focused on everything else. I never even thought about you, about us, about them. Sophia's eyes softened for a brief moment. It wasn't just you, Ethan. It was me, too. He leaned forward, desperate to get some answers. But why? Why did you leave without telling me? Why did you hide them from me? Sophia took a deep breath. I thought it was the right thing to do. She paused as if choosing her words carefully. When I found out I was pregnant, I knew you weren't ready for a family. I knew you were focused on your career, and I couldn't drag you into that. Ethan's chest tightened. But why didn't you give me the choice? Why didn't you let me be part of their lives? Sophia looked away, her voice trembling. Because I was afraid. I was afraid you would choose your business over us. I was afraid you wouldn't care. I thought it was easier to keep them away from you. Ethan felt a pang of guilt hit him in the chest. He had never realized how much she had suffered. I should have known, he whispered. I should have been there for you. I should have been there for them. Sophia turned back to him, her eyes filled with tears. It wasn't just you. I didn't want them to grow up with a father who wasn't there. I didn't want them to feel like they were abandoned, like I was. Ethan reached out and gently placed his hand over hers. I never meant to make you feel that way, Sophia. I never meant to hurt you or them. But I won't run anymore. I promise you, I won't walk away. She looked at him, searching his eyes for any sign of doubt. You're serious? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan nodded, his grip tightening on her hand. I'm serious. I want to be their father. I want to make things right, for them and for you. Sophia stared at him for a long moment, her face softening. I don't know if I can trust you, Ethan. I don't know if I can let you back in. I understand, Ethan said, but I'm not asking you to trust me right away. I'm asking for a chance to prove I can be the father they deserve. Sophia took a deep breath, her fingers brushing against his. I'll think about it, she said softly, but don't make promises you can't keep. As Ethan left the apartment, he felt a new weight on his shoulders. It wasn't over, but it was a start, the first step toward making things right, the first step toward being the father he should have been all along, and he wasn't going to waste any more time. Ethan's heart was pounding as he walked away from the apartment. The conversation with Sophia had left him shaken, but he couldn't afford to dwell on it. He had a mission now, a mission to make things right, no matter how difficult it might be. As he sat in his car, staring out at the city lights, he knew that this wasn't going to be easy. He couldn't just walk into their lives and expect everything to fall into place. Sophia was right to be cautious. He had abandoned her, and he had abandoned them, But he couldn't keep running from his mistakes. He had to fight for them. He had to fight for his family. The next morning, Ethan was up early. He spent the day meeting with his lawyers, making arrangements to get more information about Sophia and the children. He knew he had to act quickly. The longer he waited, the harder it would be to build a relationship with them. As the hours passed, his thoughts kept drifting back to Sophia. He remembered the way she looked at him when he promised to be there for the children. He had meant it. But could she believe him? Could she trust him again after everything he had done? He had no answers, but he was determined to find them. By the time he arrived back at his penthouse, it was already late. He was exhausted, but he couldn't rest. He grabbed his phone and dialed a number he had never thought he would call again. Sophia didn't pick up. He tried again. "I don't expect that," he replied quietly. "But I want you to know that I'm not going anywhere. I'm here for them." Sophia's eyes softened for a moment before she looked away. "I've been through a lot, Ethan," she said, her voice quiet. "I don't know if I can trust you again." Ethan nodded. He understood. "You don't have to trust me right away," he said, "but I'll keep showing up. I'll keep proving that I'm here." Sophia didn't say anything, but Ethan could see the uncertainty in her eyes. He had a long way to go, but he was willing to fight for them, for his family. Sophia sat at the kitchen table, her hands trembling as she stirred the coffee in her mug. The morning light filtered through the window, casting a soft glow over the room. But no amount of light could push away the heaviness in her heart. Ethan. He was trying. She could see it. He was showing up every day, spending time with the kids, doing what he could to make up for lost time. But could she let him back in? Could she really trust him again after everything that had happened? Her mind kept replaying their last conversation. Ethan had promised he wasn't going anywhere. He said he was there for the children, and for her, too. But her heart was still guarded. She wasn't sure she could handle the pain of being let down again. The sound of footsteps in the hallway interrupted her thoughts. Aaron came running into the kitchen, his face bright with excitement. "Mom! Guess what?" Sophia smiled, ruffling his hair. "What is it, sweetie?" "I learned how to do a flip," Aaron exclaimed, jumping up and down. "Look!" Sophia couldn't help but laugh as she watched him attempt the flip, his little legs kicking in the air as he tried to balance himself. "You're getting pretty good at that," she said, still smiling. Aaron grinned. "I'll show Daddy later." Her smile faltered for a moment. The mention of Ethan stung a little. Aaron didn't know how complicated things still were between her and Ethan. To him, it was simple. Ethan had promised he would be there. He'd already made a connection with him, and Aaron was willing to accept it. Sophia, on the other hand, was still struggling. She was scared. That afternoon, Ethan showed up at the apartment, just like he had every day for the past few weeks. Sophia had been watching from the window when she saw his car pull up. Her heart gave a little lurch, but she pushed the feeling aside. She didn't know what was happening inside her. Part of her wanted to run to him, to let him in and finally find peace for their family. But the other part of her was terrified. She didn't know if she could handle being hurt again. Ethan knocked on the door, and when it opened, he smiled warmly. "Hey, Sophia." She stepped back to let him in. "Hey," she said, her voice quiet but steady. As he walked in, Aaron came running toward him. "Daddy, Daddy, look what I can do." Ethan's face lit up as Aaron tried his flip again. "That's amazing, buddy," he said, clapping his hands. Sophia watched them together, her heart aching. She could see how much Aaron adored Ethan already. It was obvious. But was it enough for her? Later, the three of them sat together at the kitchen table, eating dinner. It felt almost like a normal family dinner. But the tension between Sophia and Ethan was palpable. She kept glancing at him, unsure of what to say. She could feel his eyes on her, waiting for her to speak. But she couldn't bring herself to break the silence. Ethan finally put down his fork and looked at her. "Sophia, I know this isn't easy. I know I can't change the past, but I want to be here for you and the kids. I'm trying, okay?" Sophia nodded, but her eyes were distant. She wasn't sure what to say. "I know you're scared," Ethan continued, his voice softer now. "But I swear, I'm not going anywhere. I just want to be a father to them. I want to help you, Sophia. I want us to build something, a family. But you have to give me a chance." She sighed, her chest heavy with emotion. "It's not that simple, Ethan. I've been doing this on my own for so long. I'm not sure I can just let you back in. I understand, he said, but please don't shut me out. There was silence between them as she tried to gather her thoughts. Finally, she spoke. I know you want to do the right thing. I can see that, but I'm still not sure. Ethan reached across the table and gently took her hand. You don't have to decide everything right now, Sophia, but I want you to know that I'm here. I want to be a part of their lives, and I want to be a part of yours too. She pulled her hand back, not out of anger, but out of uncertainty. I need more time, she whispered, looking away. I can't just jump back into something I'm not ready for. Ethan nodded, his heart sinking a little. He had hoped for more, but he knew he couldn't rush her. I'll wait, he said softly. I'll do whatever it takes. Sophia looked up at him, her eyes filled with sadness. I don't know if I can trust you, Ethan. Not yet. He didn't respond right away. He knew she was right. He had to prove himself. He couldn't force her to trust him, but he wasn't going to give up. As Ethan left that night, he felt the weight of the situation pressing on him. He wasn't sure how much longer he could keep this up without breaking through to her, but he couldn't give up on them. Not again. Ethan woke up early the next morning, the weight of everything still on his mind. He had spent the night tossing and turning, thinking about what Sophia had said and what she hadn't. He wanted to give her time, he truly did. But every moment without her, without the children, felt like a part of him was missing. He had made mistakes. He couldn't change the past, but he was determined to make the future better for them. He couldn't stop thinking about the promise he had made, to be there for them, to be a father. Later that morning, he drove to the small apartment again. His heart was heavy with the uncertainty of what might happen when he saw Sophia. He parked his car and stood in front of the door, taking a deep breath before knocking. Sophia answered, looking surprised but not unhappy to see him. Ethan, she said softly. I've been thinking, he began, his voice steady but full of emotion, about everything, about us. And I know I haven't been there. I know I've let you down, but I won't give up. I'm not going anywhere. Sophia looked at him for a moment, her eyes searching his face. I know you're trying, Ethan. I see that. But I can't promise anything. Not yet. I don't need you to promise anything. I just need you to know that I'm here. For you. For them. He stepped closer, looking her in the eyes. I'm not going to walk away. She didn't say anything at first. For a moment, they just stood there, the silence between them thick. Finally, Sophia sighed, stepping back and opening the door wider. Come in, Ethan. The kids were playing in the living room when he walked in. Aaron immediately ran up to him, smiling. Daddy, look at this. Ethan bent down as Aaron showed him a picture he had drawn of the three of them, all standing together, holding hands. It took everything Ethan had not to cry. He put a hand on Aaron's shoulder. That's beautiful, buddy. I love it. Lily was sitting on the couch, quietly watching them. She didn't speak much, but there was a soft look in her eyes as she glanced up at him. Ethan smiled at her. Hey, Lily, how's your drawing going? She nodded slowly, then shyly handed him a piece of paper. It was a picture of a house, with a tall man and a little girl standing by the door. That's us, she said softly. Ethan's heart swelled. They were starting to accept him, starting to believe in him. He couldn't believe how quickly they had opened up to him. After some time, the kids went to their room to play, leaving Ethan and Sophia alone in the living room. The silence between them was thick, but this time, it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt hopeful. Ethan sat down across from her, his hands clasped together. I know I can't make up for the past, but I want to build something new with you, with the kids. I want to make things right. Sophia looked down, her expression softening. I'm not sure how this is all going to work, Ethan. I'm scared, but I see you trying. Ethan nodded. I'll keep trying. For them. For you. Sophia let out a long breath. I don't know what the future holds, but I'm willing to take it one step at a time. Ethan smiled. It wasn't the answer he had hoped for, but it was enough for now. That night, as they sat together, the kids nestled between them on the couch. Ethan realized something. He wasn't looking for perfection. He wasn't looking for things to be fixed all at once. What mattered was that they were together, that they were starting to heal. He wasn't sure where the road would take them, But for the first time in a long time, he felt hopeful. He felt like he could do this. They could do this. Weeks passed, and things between them slowly began to change. There were still moments of doubt, moments when Sophia would pull back or Ethan would question his place in their lives. But little by little, they were moving forward. Sophia started to trust him again, and Ethan began to see the children not as a distant memory, but as his future. One day, while they were out for a walk in the park, Ethan and Sophia stopped near a fountain. The kids were running ahead, laughing and playing, but Sophia stayed by his side. She looked up at him, her expression more open than it had ever been. "You've changed," she said quietly. "I can see it now." Ethan smiled, his heart full. "I haven't changed overnight, but I'm trying. I'm here." Sophia reached out, taking his hand. "Thank you, Ethan, for not giving up." As they walked hand in hand toward the kids, Ethan realized that this was just the beginning. They had a long way to go, but for the first time in a long time, he believed that they could make it work. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be struggles, setbacks, and moments of doubt. But as long as they had each other, they could face whatever came their way. This was a new beginning, a chance at redemption, a chance for them. And this time, he wasn't going to let it slip away. Ethan stood still, gazing out at the city skyline, the soft glow of the lights below reflecting in his eyes. The weight of lost years and missed chances pressed on him. In the chaos of wealth and power, he'd lost sight of what truly mattered: his family. The image of Sophia and their children filled his mind. The faces he had never known, the family he had unknowingly lost, the love he should have fought for. He could see it all now, clear as day. With a quiet exhale, Ethan knew that everything had changed. He wasn't the same man who had walked into this city years ago, consumed by ambition and pride. He was someone new, someone who finally understood what it meant to be a father, a protector, and the partner he should have been all along. His phone buzzed again, breaking the silence. Sophia's name flashed on the screen. He hesitated for a moment, gathering his thoughts. When he answered, his voice was steady, but there was a rawness to it that hadn't been there before. "I'm here, Sophia," he said, a quiet promise in his voice, "and I'm not going anywhere." If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button to show your support. It truly helps me bring more impactful stories to you. If you haven't already, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss out on more emotional, thought-provoking tales. I'd really love to hear your thoughts. Comment below and share what part of the story touched you most or how it made you feel. Your feedback means the world and shapes the future of the channel. Thank you for being part of this community.